1805, dawn crept over the frosted plains of Moravia as the young French emperor surveyed the enemy massed upon the Pratzen Heights. Before him stood the combined might of Austria and Russia, confident in their numbers, certain of victory. Yet Napoleon saw not danger, but opportunity. With a calm, calculating gaze, he traced the contours of the battlefield, analyzing the strands of a grand design he had been weaving for some time. On the auspicious occasion of the 220th anniversary of the Battle of Austerlitz, let us dig into the tactics that made this battle a masterclass in military history. Europe had been in turmoil since the French Revolutionary Wars began in 1792. By 1797, after 5 years of fighting, France crushed the first coalition of Austria, Prussia, Britain, Spain, and several Italian states. A second coalition rose in 1798, led by Britain, Austria, and Russia, with support from the Ottomans, Portugal, and Naples. But by 1801, it too collapsed, leaving Britain alone against the new French consulate. In 1802, France and Britain agreed to peace under the Treaty of Amiens. Yet tensions never truly eased. Britain disliked returning the Cape Colony and the Dutch West Indies to the Batavian Republic, while Napoleon raged at Britain's refusal to give up Malta. Matters worsened when he sent troops to reassert French control and restore slavery in Saint-Domingue. By May 1803, Britain had declared war once again. By December 1804, Britain and Sweden formed the core of a new alliance, the Third Coalition. Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger worked tirelessly through 1804 and 1805 to unite Europe against France. By April, Britain and Russia had signed an alliance, and soon after, Austria, still seeking revenge for past defeats, joined the coalition. Under the Anglo-Russian Convention of 1805, Britain agreed to pay Russia £1.25 million per 100,000 troops mobilized against Napoleon. By bankrolling Russia and Austria, Britain hoped to build a continental front strong enough to contain and ultimately defeat the French Empire. The Austro-Russian plan in 1805 was simple on paper. Austria would hold Bavaria and block the French advance until large Russian armies under Kutuzov and Buxtehude arrived to join them. Once united, the coalition intended to overwhelm Napoleon with superior numbers in southern Germany. Before the formation of the Third Coalition, Napoleon had already assembled a massive army at Boulogne, the Armée d'Angleterre, intended for the invasion of Britain. Across 6 sprawling camps, the soldiers underwent intense training while Napoleon reshaped the French military into a new revolutionary structure, the corps system. Each corps functioned as its own miniature army, complete with infantry, cavalry, and artillery. This transformation turned the French army into a collection of self-sustaining, highly flexible war machines. The brilliance of the system lay in its mobility. These corps could advance along separate roads, draw supplies from different regions, and hold their own in battle for an entire day, giving Napoleon the ability to concentrate his forces rapidly and strike a decisive blow at the critical moment. Supporting this was a formidable cavalry reserve of 22,000 men, cuirassiers, dragoons, light cavalry, and their accompanying guns, ready to deliver the final shock that defined Napoleonic warfare. As the armies of the Third Coalition marched towards France, Napoleon had to abandon his plans for the invasion of Britain for the moment and address the problem at hand. He rapidly moved this army corps across France and Germany. These Boulogne veterans became the foundation of the Grande Armée, which grew to around 210,000 men during the German campaign leading to Ulm and subsequently to Austerlitz. During the Ulm Campaign, the corps system allowed the French to move with great speed, surround the Austrians from multiple directions, and seal every escape route. The result was the near bloodless capture of Mack's entire Austrian army, proving the corps system's effectiveness. The Allies could not coordinate their movements. The Austrians under General Karl Marx von Liebknecht advanced too far into Bavaria before the Russians were anywhere near the theater. Napoleon entered Vienna in mid-November. General Kutuzov refused to defend the city and instead retreated his Russian army towards Olmütz to join incoming Russian and Austrian forces near the village of Austerlitz. As his enemies regrouped, Napoleon's own numbers shrank because he had to detach large portions of the Grande Armée for other strategic tasks. Many units were left to secure newly occupied German territories, guard supply lines, and hold key crossings between Ulm and Vienna. He also had to send major forces with Ney and Marmont to watch Archduke Charles in Tyrol, Italy, and Archduke John in Bohemia, while cavalry and infantry were scattered in pursuit of fleeing Austrians. As a result, only part of his original 210,000 men were available for concentration at Austerlitz. By late November, Napoleon had just over 50,000 men to face his enemy of 86,000 strong Austro-Russians. On top of it, the Kingdom of Prussia eagerly waited for a cause to join the coalition at any moment. Napoleon was therefore in dire need of a decisive victory, or his new empire will collapse even before it fully rose. In the face of such adversities, Napoleon was not without a plan. Instead of hiding his weakness, he deliberately exaggerated it to lure the Austro-Russians into attacking the French. He staged false negotiations, ordered his troops to feign setbacks even in minor clashes, and delayed the concentration of his corps, all to provoke the enemy into fighting on his terms. Accordingly, the French vanguard under Marshal Joachim Murat pretended to be forced out of Vichy when the Allies attacked on November the 28th, who interpreted this as a sign of exhaustion in the French offensive. That same day, Napoleon retreated his army and abandoned the Pratzen Plateau to the enemy, further convincing his opponents that he was on the verge of retreating and refusing to fight. Both Austrian generals and the Tsar's advisors felt certain of their advantage. Confident in their position, they chose to attack before Archduke Charles and the Second Russian Army arrived. As Napoleon hoped, the Allies stretched their left wing toward Austerlitz and Újest, aiming to outflank the French right, a logical Allied strategy that could actually work, provided they do not expose the wing to isolation. On the 30th of November, they occupied the Pratzen Plateau, from which Napoleon expected them to descend to strike his right, which was to be left seemingly weak. And when a part of the Allied army would be busy assaulting the French right, Napoleon planned for Marshal Soult to seize the plateau in response, splitting the Allied army and defeating them in detail. And to finally reinforce the right, Napoleon recalled Bernadotte and Davout. Marshal Davout was to march 110 kilometers in just 48 hours to aid the emperor, an apparently impossible task. But then again, it was the Iron Marshal we are talking about. It was the 1st of December, and the Russo-Austrian line stretched from the snow-covered Olmützbrunn road in the north to the Viennabrunn road in the west, down to the frozen ponds in the south and the town of Austerlitz in the east, an area roughly 8 by 12 kilometers. At its center rose the Pratzen Plateau, standing about 40 meters above the surrounding ground and commanding the space between the Goldbach and Litowa streams. The Austro-Russian army was arranged in 7 columns. The first 3, about 30,000 men under Buxhoevden, formed the left and were ordered to move from Pratzen towards Sokolnitz and Telnitz via Aujest. Kolowrath's 4th column, 17,000 strong, formed the center and was to follow behind the 3rd column towards Kobelnitz. The 5th column, Prince Liechtenstein's 7,000 cavalry, would shift from the center to support the right along the Brunn road. On the right, Bagration's 6th column was tasked with attacking Santon and Bosenitz, while the 7th column under Grand Duke Constantine remained in reserve on the Brunn road. In total, there were roughly about 85,000 Allied troops and 278 guns supported the position. On the French side, Marshal Soult's 4th Corps held the right around Puntowitz, with small detachments pushed down towards Sokolnitz and Telnitz, directly facing the enemy's main strength. Bernadotte's 1st Corps stood at Jizikovi, with Murat's reserve cavalry just south of him, while Marshal Lannes' 5th Corps guarded the northern sector along the Brunn-Austerlitz road anchored on the fortified Santon Hill. The reserves included the Grenadiers and the Guards, deployed behind Soult and Bernadotte. Marshal Davout's 3rd Corps was rapidly marching towards the lightly defended French right. On the eve of the great battle, Napoleon gathered his marshals atop Joragne Hill to shape the final contours of his masterpiece. When the plans were set, the Emperor lay down among the campfires and his loyal soldiers, taking only a few hours of rest in the cold bivouac. Dawn would usher in the first anniversary of his young empire, and with it, a test whose outcome would decide the very survival of his reign. Before first light, at around 6:30 a.m., the advance guard of the Allied 1st Column, commanded by Kienmeyer, began moving slowly forward from Augest towards Telnitz. The first attack on Telnitz was made only by the 1st Zeckel-Grenz Regiment, some 600 strong, a force far too weak and in a formation that made a perfect target for the awaiting French. The Grenz infantry were good at fieldcraft and marksmanship. However, they were not used correctly at Austerlitz and were sent into the attack in the same tight formations as the regular line infantry. In this formation, they made a perfect target for the awaiting French. Telnitz was defended by 2 foreign tirailleur battalions from Corsica and the Po, and the 3rd Line Infantry, all totaling up to 2,500 infantry. Their skirmishers lined the ridge in front, and about 1,000-strong Margaron's cavalry guarded the right. The first wave of tightly packed Allied units were shot to pieces and forced back. Reinforcements from the 2nd Shekel Battalion fared no better, with the Allied plan depending on securing a crossing at Telnitz. Stutterheim rallied the battered battalions for another push that finally drove the French skirmishers back into the streets. Still refusing to use his 12 guns, Kienmeyer ordered repeated infantry assaults. After nearly an hour and multiple failed attacks, the village finally fell when Buxhoevden sent fresh troops, Jägers and New Ingermanland musketeers, to reinforce the depleted Grenzers. Around 8 a.m., as the sky cleared, General Legrand of Soult's corps inspected the situation near Sokolnitz. Suddenly, masses of Russians from Langeron's 2nd Column emerged from the thinning fog. Legrand deployed the 26th Light Infantry to support the isolated French tirailleurs, but Sokolnitz's 1,800 defenders were soon overwhelmed by 8,000 Allied troops with 30 guns, and were driven out by 8:30 a.m. Although the Allies had taken Telnitz, the French were far from beaten. Davout's exhausted Third Corps, marching since before daylight, was now approaching. At 8:50 a.m., Marshal Davout received an urgent request from Bagration. The third line had been driven out of Telnitz and needed support. Instantly, Davout ordered the 1st Dragoons and Hillaire's infantry brigade toward the village. At 9 a.m., the 15th Light and 108th Line Infantry marched into Telnitz with drums beating. Their sudden counterattack swept the Allies out of the village and into the ranks of the new Ingerman Land Musketeers, throwing the whole formation into confusion. But as the victorious 108th pushed beyond the village, the Hessen-Homburg Hussars charged and cut them down, driving them back. Amid the smoke and lingering mist, the retreating 108th were then mistakenly fired upon by their own comrades of the 26th Light. The confusion ended only when Captain Liverdaut raised one of the regiment's eagles. With Telnitz retaken and the line stabilized, Kienmeyer secured the village. Buxhoden, commanding the Allied left wing, now halted his advance, waiting for the 2nd and 3rd columns to progress before pushing further. Around 9 a.m. at Sokolnitz, Friant's exhausted brigades under Locquet and Kister formed west of the village. Despite fatigue, Locquet launched the 48th Line forward, its determined assault driving the Russians back. The 111th Line followed, sweeping confused Russian troops from the streets. While Locquet cleared the village, Kister held the high ground in reserve. Langeron soon counterattacked with fresh Perm and Kursk troops, retaking Sokolnitz and trapping the 48th in the southern buildings. Friant responded by sending Kister's brigade into the castle and pheasantry. Just as Langeron prepared another assault, alarming reports arrived. French troops were already advancing onto the Pratzen Heights. We now leave the battle in the south and turn our attention to events on the Pratzen Heights. Confusion plagued the Allied advance when Liechtenstein's 5th column of cavalry pushed through the infantry in the dark, delaying Kamensky's brigade. Kutuzov, already slow to issue orders, still held back the 4th column, provoking a sharp exchange with Tsar Alexander, who accused him of waiting as if for a parade. Reluctantly, Kutuzov ordered the advance around 8:45 a.m. These delays, however, acted to the benefit of the Allies. Napoleon, expecting the Pratzen Heights to be empty, launched Soult's corps at nearly the same moment, sending Saint-Hilaire and Vandamme up the slopes while the bulk of the French army massed behind them. Unaware of the French approach through the fog, Miloradovich's 4th column and the Russian guard atop the heights were caught completely off guard. Major Toll was the first to realize the masses in the mist were French, prompting hurried Russian deployments around Prats as Soult's attack began. When the French suddenly appeared climbing the Pratzen Heights, the Allies were as shocked as the French themselves, who had expected the plateau to be empty. Instead, Saint-Hilaire's and Vandamme's leading troops ran straight into Miloradovich's and Kolowrath's battalions, hastily deploying on the slopes. The first French skirmishers were driven back by sharp Russian volleys, and the battle for the Pratzen began in earnest. Soult had originally ordered Saint-Hilaire to bypass Praz village, but unreliable information suggested the place was weakly defended. Acting on this, he sent Colonel Mazas and the 1st Battalion of the 14th Line directly into the village, without skirmishers. They were greeted by a devastating volley from the Novgorod regiment, which threw the battalion into disorder and forced it back. General Thierbaut quickly rallied the shaken men and launched a determined counterattack with the 14th and 36th Line. Their assault broke through with such force that the Novgorod and Absheron defenders fled past Tsar Alexander, ignoring his attempts to halt them. Kutuzov himself was grazed by a musket ball during the collapse. As Thibault reformed his brigade, he spotted large formations approaching through the murk to the east. Unsure whether they were friend or foe, he deployed his battalions in a defensive line ready to meet threats from two directions. French adaptability and shifting seamlessly between columns and lines showed its full value. The division held firm. When Thibault and Murat crept forward to investigate, they confirmed the approaching troops were Austrian, likely hard to identify at first because both armies wore similar gray greatcoats. The French unmasked a battery of 9 guns and delivered a punishing volley that staggered the Austrians. They soon rallied, however, joining Kamensky's brigade for a renewed assault. Weyrother was unhorsed, and Austrian General Jurczyk was badly wounded. Saint-Hilaire considered falling back, but Colonel Pousset of the 10th Light urged him to drive forward before the enemy realized how thin the French line really was. Meanwhile, Langeron, still skeptical that the French were actually on the plateau, rode up himself. He found Kamensky's brigade shattered and his own Kursk regiment suddenly under attack from both Saint-Hilaire in front and Levasseur's brigade hitting their flank. The Kursk regiment was virtually annihilated, losing its standards, guns, and 1,600 of its 2,000 men. The 3 weak battalions of the Podolia regiment behind them were swept back toward Sokolnitz. By 11 a.m., the French firmly held the Pratzen Heights. To the north, Vandamme was advancing against Miloradovich's small force of 5,000 men. Vandamme had over 7,000 of his own troops, plus another 3,200 from Varet's brigade. Under this pressure, Russian and Austrian battalions fell back step by step. General Berg was wounded, Rottermann's Austrians resisted stubbornly, and Miloradovich tried to rally his men around a battalion of the Izmailovsky Guard. But the French concerted attack, Ferré on the right, Schinner on the left, finally broke the Allied line. Miloradovich's 4th column was effectively destroyed. Vandamme had cleared the Stare Vinohrady, but ahead of him now stood the most dangerous formation on the field, the Russian Imperial Guard. While Vandamme was having a minor wound dressed, he noticed a large force approaching. Major Bigaret moved with the 4th line to identify it and formed square, only for Russian Guard cavalry to split aside and reveal a battery that blasted the square with canister. Constantine's cavalry then charged. The 4th beat off 2 attacks, but was hit by a 3rd regiment while reloading. Over 200 men were cut down, and the Battalion Eagle captured. The 24th Light attempted to deploy in line, but were ridden down. Napoleon, arriving from the Zoran, saw French infantry fleeing before Russian cavalry, shouting "Vive l'Empereur" even as they ran past him. With Bessières and the Guard cavalry arriving, Napoleon sent General Rapp forward with a small mixed detachment. Rapp initially pushed the Russians back, but soon became entangled among enemy infantry. Constantine counterattacked with the Chevalier Guard, forcing Rapp to regroup. A major cavalry battle followed, about 1,800 Russian Guard horse against roughly 1,100 French. The French, able to rally behind their infantry, eventually drove the Russians back toward Krsanovitz. With Bernadotte's 1st Corps and the Guard arriving, the Pratzen Plateau was finally secure. To the north, Lannes' Corps and Bagration's Russians became locked in a fierce fight Napoleon had not expected. Believing the Allies committed in the south, he ordered Lannes and Murat to hold until Soult secured the Pratzen, then cut the Allied retreat. Instead, Lannes found heavy resistance. Liechtenstein's cavalry filled the gap near Blasowitz and Holubitz, while Russian Guard Jägers occupied Blasowitz. When Napoleon learned Soult was on the Pratzen, he ordered Lannes forward. Kellerman advanced, but a premature charge by Constantine's Uhlans, unsupported by artillery, was shattered by French volleys and canister, losing 400 men, and Essen too. Russian cavalry then struck the French 4th Hussars, but Kellerman and Sebastiani counterattacked, driving them back. As both sides regrouped, Bagration advanced, occupying villages and pushing French outposts toward the Santon. French artillery in the 17th Light eventually forced the Russian Jaegers back, stabilizing the flank. Cavalry combat raged, with Russian squadrons attacking piecemeal while the French maintained better coordination. Murat finally committed the cuirassiers and carabiniers, who broke the Russians after several clashes. With the cavalry threat eased, Lannes attacked Blasowitz. After several repulses, combined assaults by the 13th Light and 51st Line forced the Guardsjägers out. By noon, 5,000 infantry on each side engaged directly. French discipline held under heavy Russian fire, while Dalpoul's cuirassiers threatened the Russian flank. Bagration withdrew toward Weleschowitz, aided by a strong Austrian battery. His retreat secured the road to Hungary, allowing him to rejoin the main army and preventing the French from cutting off the Allied escape. Napoleon then shifted focus south. Saint-Hilaire, Vandamme, Legrand, Boyer's dragoons, and Oudinot's grenadiers advanced toward Sokolnitz and Augezd. Friant's exhausted division, still holding the northern edge of Sokolnitz, counterattacked just as the French descended the plateau, trapping Russian forces. Prebyszewski attempted to break north, but was overwhelmed. Over 4,000 Russians were captured. By 4:30 p.m., Napoleon reached the chapel of St. Anthony. French pressure drove the remaining Russian troops toward the Sachin Ponds, where artillery and musketry forced their surrender, sealing the victory. Austerlitz was a stunning triumph. The battle lasted less than 9 hours, leaving the Austro-Russian army shattered with 27,000 casualties, 16,000 dead and wounded, 11,000 taken prisoner, along with the loss of 185 cannons, later melted down for the Vandamme column, and 45 captured flags that today hang in the vault of Saint-Louis des Invalides. French losses, though far lighter, were still serious. 1,500 dead, nearly 7,000 wounded, several hundred prisoners, and the loss of an eagle from the 4th Line Regiment. A blow Napoleon took to heart. With his army in disarray, the Austrian emperor had no choice but to seek terms. Before dawn on December 3rd, Prince Johann von Liechtenstein met Napoleon at the Stara Posta bivouac between Possowitz and Holubitz, accompanied by Marshals Murat and Lannes. The next day, the emperors of Austria and France met at the burnt mill in Janów Dwór, south of Austerlitz, where, beneath a solitary lime tree, they agreed to an armistice. The Austrian emperor feared losing everything by prolonging the struggle, but Napoleon was just as eager to end the conflict, aware that fresh Austrian reinforcements were converging from across the Holy Roman Empire, and that Prussia stood on the brink of joining the coalition. Under these circumstances, negotiations proceeded swiftly. On December 26th, Austria signed the Treaty of Pressburg in the Primate's Palace, an agreement that effectively ended the Holy Roman Empire and acknowledged French dominance in Italy. The terms were severe. Austria ceded major territories, lost nearly 4 million inhabitants, and paid heavy indemnities, allowing France to shape what would soon become the Confederation of the Rhine. With the collapse of the Third Coalition, only Britain, absent from the battlefield, remained in open opposition to France. The Battle of Austerlitz is widely regarded as Napoleon's greatest tactical masterpiece and remains a key subject of study in military academies. By carefully selecting the battlefield, drawing the Allies into his trap, and executing his plan with precision, Napoleon achieved a victory unparalleled in his career. Today, a map table stands on the Suran Mound, his former command post, marking the ground from which he directed the battle. Although legend speaks of thousands of Allied soldiers drowning in the frozen ponds, later investigations revealed only a small number of bodies, suggesting these losses were greatly exaggerated, or that many remains had been removed beforehand. This documentary is inspired by the amazing article by Graham J. Morris, published in Battlefield Anomalies. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to our channel and watch the 100 Days War series, where we cover the last campaign of Napoleon like never before.